why and when you grew a beard?
Yes, I can. As you noticed, I do not have a beard, and I did not have one during the Lincoln-Douglas debates. In fact, I did not grow one until after I was elected president. It was after I was elected president that I received a letter from a little girl named Grace Bedell who lived in Westfield, New York. In her letter, she said, and I will paraphrase it, she said, "Mr. Lincoln, my father went to a rally for you, and he came home with one of your pictures, and I've looked at your picture, and I think you'd look better if you grew a beard." So I decided to do that, but I must tell you that that was not the only reason. That is the popularly believed reason. But if you will think about it for a moment, you will realize that I was a Westerner. Illinois at that time was considered the West. I was basically uneducated. Many of my political opponents and many of the politicians and pundits of the day were educated at Harvard and Yale and had very good education. So I had also been cast as a rail splitter, which was true. I had split rails as a young man, but my political campaign had showed me as Abe Lincoln of Illinois, Honest Abe, the rail splitter, and so on. And we faced some very momentous decisions, and it was a very important time in our country, and it was very important for people to take their president seriously. So I decided that a beard would make me look older and more dignified.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senator Douglas, I have a question for you. How did the media coverage of the Lincoln-Douglas debates in 1858 compare to the media coverage of today's elections?
Well, back in 1858, the opinion you got depended upon which newspaper you read. Each candidate had its own newspaper, which clearly was following either myself or Mr. Lincoln. There was no attempt to really be impartial. Some newspapers would clearly follow, would send news reporters out and then send by telegram reports of the meetings. And you could read, for example, the Charleston debate. You could read two different newspapers and come up with totally different reports. Fortunately, Mr. Lincoln and I have been told that that no longer exists, as everything today is fair and balanced.
Thank you, Senator. You've heard about the wit of Lincoln. I've got a couple little quick stories I'd like to tell you about it. He was, as you know, a self-educated man, and you could see the humor in everyday life that many people couldn't see. One story that he tells about himself, he was walking down the street of Springfield one night, and this man approached him and stepped over in front of him and pulled a gun out at him and said, "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to shoot you." And Mr. Lincoln was kind of taken aback, and he said, "You're going to shoot me?" He said, "Yes, I'm going to shoot you." And the president says, "Why are you going to shoot me?" And the man holding the gun said, "Well, every morning I get up and look in the mirror, and I say to myself, if I ever see a man uglier than myself, I'm going to kill him." Mr. Lincoln threw his hands up, and he said, "If I'm uglier than you, I don't want to live. Shoot me." Another time, he was accused of being two-faced. And his response was, "If I had two faces, you think I'd be wearing this one?" So he did have a sense of humor. Another story they tell, it was a day something like this, and he made many trips walking from New Salem, Illinois to Springfield to acquire books so he could become a lawyer and study the books. And it was a hot day, much like today, and he was walking down the road. He heard a horse and buggy approaching him from behind. So he stepped out in the road and flagged the buggy down. He said, "Sir, would you be so kind as to take my coat to Springfield?" And the driver of the buggy said, "I certainly would. Just tell me where you'd like for me to drop it off so you can pick it up." Mr. Lincoln responded, "That won't be a problem. I'll be in it." Okay, at this time, I'm going to see if Senator Douglas has any comments or any stories he'd like to tell about himself, or any comments he'd like to make in closing?
Well, one story I remember about Mr. Lincoln, one day he was feeling a little, feeling his oats, and he looked at me and he said, "You're so small I could eat you in one bite." I looked back at him and I said, "Well, if you did, you'd have more brains in your stomach than you've ever had in your head."
Something comes to my mind that happened to me as a lawyer practicing law in Central Illinois. It might mean something to lawyers, but I think it will mean something to non-lawyers as well. Have you ever heard the term or the advice, never ask too many questions, or don't ask a question if you don't know the answer? And this is particularly true for trial lawyers who are cross-examining a witness, because if you don't know what the answer is going to be, since it's not your witness and you probably haven't prepped them, you could get a great surprise. Well, reputedly, this happened to Lincoln once when he was representing a man who had committed mayhem. And mayhem is where you remove the body parts of a person, and in this case, the person had bitten somebody's ear off in a fight. And so he was representing this man, defending him. He was on trial. And so the state's witness was on the witness stand, and the witness had told the jury that he had seen my client bite the victim's ear off. And so I jumped up very quickly and I said, in cross-examination, "Did you actually see my client bite his ear off? Did you actually see it? Did you actually see him bite my client? Did you actually see him bite the victim's ear off?" "Well, no, I didn't." Ha! "Well, then how do you know, why do you say he bit it off?" "Well, I saw him spit it out." I learned a great lesson.
Okay, well, thank you for your attendance today. I know it's been a rather hot day. We appreciate you coming out and getting a little bit of the history of this great country, and we appreciate the fact that you're here, and keep in mind that our country is great because of great men like this that has made our country great, and people like you and me, ordinary citizens, have our responsibility to keep our country great. Thank you for being here. We appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Thank you.